Is the Trump dump finally over? He's been raging a war on three fronts: an internal battle against the Fed, a trade war with allies, and a fight to stop the proxy war in Ukraine. And today, ladies and gentlemen, Trump just scored three big wins. First, a major win against the Fed and the fight against inflation. Second, a breakthrough in the trade war with his allies. And third, a step closer to conclude the war in Ukraine. But the question I'm sure that you're wondering is, what does this mean for markets? These three bombshells could change the game entirely. By unraveling the biggest macro pressures holding the markets down, we could be looking at the beginning of a major shift. But is this finally a catalyst for a true breakout or just another fake out? Today, I'm breaking it all down for you guys. The macro moves, the market impact, and what comes next. So if that sounds good to you guys, let's dive into it. Okay, guys, the first thing to notice is that we have seen whales accumulating like never before. This shows you Bitcoin inflows into wallets that are long-term holders that are not selling. And as you guys can see, it is absolutely spiking. You've got whales that have been holding Bitcoin for a long time. They're not selling. They're just stacking and accumulating at these prices. Something is probably coming. Okay, guys, and this is a huge turn of events. Of course, after Zelensky came to the White House, had the horrible meeting with Trump and Vance, now after the meeting in Saudi Arabia, it seems like tides are turning as Ukraine ceasefire breaks through, sends the markets into green. Bitcoin retakes 83,000. But what does this mean? Well, Ukraine has agreed to the US proposal for a ceasefire for at least 30 days. And this comes just after, I don't know if you guys saw on the weekend, Russia invaded another northeastern part of Ukraine, showing dominance. And now, after the meeting in Saudi Arabia, Ukraine has finally agreed to a ceasefire. Remember, Zelensky before was saying that he didn't trust a ceasefire, he wanted, but now they have. So now the cards are on Putin's table. Is he also going to agree to ceasefire? We don't know yet. But shortly after the news hit, the Ontario, Canada, Premier Doug Ford appeared to back down from his tit-to-tat with President Trump. And U.S. stock markets moved sizable losses to gains, and crypto turned decisively higher. All right, guys, and let's listen to this clip from Marco Rubio.
Ending this war once and for all. Today, we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation. I want to personally thank, we both want to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, His Majesty, for hosting us, for making this possible. They've been instrumental in this process, and we're very grateful to them for hosting us here today.
So we'll see what happens over here, guys. But of course, you know, the war in Ukraine, as we talked about before, would be beneficial, help with uncertainty, calm down the markets, lower oil prices, lower inflation, these kind of things. As the Kobolesi letter says, the U.S. has resumed both military aid and intelligence sharing to Ukraine. Remember, the deal between Ukraine was for the rare earth minerals, and that's what the U.S. wants to get out of the deal. It seems like Zelensky's come to the table. Again, now it's on Trump. Now, on the other front, there seems to be a crazy battle going on between the United States and Canada. Look, for me, I've got no skin in this game. I am apolitical, taking a total neutral stance on this. I don't know. Again, I'm really curious if there's any Canadians in the audience. Let me know what you guys think about this. But this is where it all began, with the extreme kind of tension between US and Canada. And so Trump puts on Truth Social, based on Ontario, Canada, placing a 25% tariff on electricity coming in the United States, I have instructed my Secretary of Commerce to add an additional 25% tariff to 50% on all steel and aluminum coming into the United States from Canada, one of the highest tariffing nations anywhere in the world. This will go into effect tomorrow morning, March 12th. Also, Canada must immediately drop their anti-American farmer tariff of 250 to 390% on various U.S. dairy products, which have long been considered outrageous. That is pretty outrageous. I will shortly be declaring a national emergency electricity within the threatened area. This will quickly allow the U.S. to do what has to be done to alleviate the abusive threat from Canada. So that happened. And then just 4 hours later, from Charlie Kirk, says 4 hours later, after President Trump escalated U.S. tariffs on Canada, Ontario has agreed to suspend its 25% tariff on electricity exports to the U.S. pending negotiations on renewed USMCA trade deal. So as you guys can see, the tariff thing is really Trump's way of getting deals done. And Trump really understands like where the weak points are of the other countries, you know, and if Canada's GDP largely depends on exporting aluminum and steel, and that would significantly deter them to export steel in the United States, it's going to hurt the country's GDP. And that's why Canada backed down. And now we see this trade war regressing. It is a pretty strong-armed way for these negotiations to happen, but they're happening. I mean, it's happening. So as we've talked about before on the show, guys, Trump's first inflation report due as risk investors seek signs of cooling, right? So what happened? Well, we just now, just an hour ago or so, got the CPI data that we expected this week, and it came in better than expected. As the Kobolesi letter says, breaking CPI for February falls to 2.8%, below expectations of 2.9%. Core CPI falls to 3.1%, below expectations of 3.2%. This marks the first decline in both headline and core CPI since July 2024. Inflation is cooling down in the US. So, you know, we've pointed out a lot of times here over the Truflation data. As you can see, it's much lower over here. We expected this, right? We talked about this on the show. I told you it's probably going to come in lower. Also, the cost of fuel is coming down. As you can see, it's now coming down. I mean, it was actually the lowest it's been in many years here. That's also going to bring down inflation. And what's really important to pay attention to here is what the block is reporting on here. It says Chung of Presto noted that how long this will play out is difficult to tell. But given the market's increasing expectation of the Fed's rate cuts in the first half of this year amid market jitters, the next key event to watch for any clue on potential bottoming is the FOMC next week, March 19th. Guys, mark your calendars. Huge date, right? Powell will most likely leave the rate unchanged. That's what everyone's betting on. But the market will be looking eagerly for any dovish language in his briefing, which can hint at a potential cuts in May or June FOMCs. So we will be watching that. This is historically, for you guys don't know, everyone watches these FOMC meetings, and Fed, and Jerome Powell comes out and everyone just picks through everything he says with a fine-tooth comb and looks for any kind of hints or signs of what's going to happen. And usually it's pretty clear which direction the Fed is leaning. What we want to see is some sort of sign that they're likely to lower rates. And as the Kobolesi letter says over here again, it's actually working. Markets now see base case of at least 3 rate cuts in 2025 with a rising 45% chance of 4 rate cuts. In fact, markets now see a 50-50 chance of cuts beginning as soon as May 2025. Just weeks ago, markets were pricing in 0 rate cuts for 2025. Huge shift in what's going on in the macro markets right now, right? And it's what we've been talking about on this show for a long time. It literally is Trump's plan coming to work. Now, as you guys know, in Congress right now, in DC, right now, stablecoins are the first priority. Why? Because it's going to help with US dollar dominance, but there's going to be stablecoin legislation that's written, right? And it's going to be a really big deal. It's going to bring trillions of dollars on chain. So to give you guys some context on how much the stablecoin market is expected to grow, there is some research that came out from Standard Chartered Bank, and it says today the stablecoin market taps into a meager 1% of the US money supply, about 21 trillion, and 1% of total foreign exchange transactions, about 2.1 trillion. That's according to analysts at Standard Chartered, who said they've seen plenty of room for growth. As the sector becomes legitimized, a move to 10% on each measure is feasible, Geoff Kendrick and Nick Philport wrote in the bank's 9-page analysis that level growth would represent a market ranging from at least $2.1 trillion to $2.3 trillion. Right now, the stablecoin market is just measured in, I don't know, I think it's around like 100 billion or something. Don't quote me on that exactly. But you can see the stablecoin market is likely to grow by orders of magnitude, especially as we get more clarity from the United States. And the most obvious use case for this is things like B2B payments and remittances, right? And so in this article over here, it says it's estimated that B2B payments volume totals approximately 120 trillion per year globally. Huge money in payments, right? And payments have been one of the most inefficient things ever. And that's what Bitcoin tried to solve, right? If you look at Satoshi's white paper, it's titled, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. If you don't know, back in 2017 and 18 and 16, we had this big block versus small block war within the Bitcoin community on how Bitcoin could potentially scale. The consensus was to keep the block small, which means that Bitcoin will forever remain slow and expensive, and now has been cemented as a digital gold, which means there's still room. I said this before on the channel before. I said this before when we covered something like Kaspa, right? That there's still room for someone to create a proof of work, peer-to-peer cash system, that's not reliant on US dollars or fiat to back it. Still room. This is still a use case that has not been solved for, right? And the other one that's huge is remittance, right? As more people become global nomads, traveling, working online, people helping their families back home, etc. Remittance, meaning people are sending money to different countries, is estimated to reach $1.3 trillion by 2032. Guys, and all of this is to bring you to today's channel sponsor. Now, keep in mind, I'm really particular about who I work with as channel partners. So I want to bring your attention to this because there's actually a lot of traction happening with Quai. If you would have known about Kaspa, for example, in the early days when it first launched, and you would have been mining that or paying attention to it, it would have been a really, really good bet to place as it ran up to a $5 billion market cap. And it wasn't even like an official alt season yet. That was in 2024. So I see Quai as something similar to Kaspa, and some might even argue it's even better than Kaspa. So they run basically an interconnected network of blockchains, achieving a proof of work similar to Bitcoin. So the tokens are emitted the same way that Bitcoin is through mining. And this is really the most fair way of distributing currency. It's also a way that I believe the government is going to give these types of chains a pass, and it will not be branded as a security, but more as a commodity or potentially a currency. We yet to find out. But Quai is doing something pretty interesting over here, and that's why I'm talking about it today. Like I said before, one of the most interesting things about Quai is it's already set up to achieve the kinds of throughput that's necessary for cross-border payments, remittance, B2B payments, etc. It's doing 50,000 transactions per second, which is more than Visa does. And they've done that by just basically a state-of-the-art architecture. I'll get to the team in a little bit, the geniuses who built this. More importantly, I just wanted to bring it to your attention today so that you can go do your own due diligence. Now, not only is it just used as a form of payment, but it also is a smart contract platform. So you can still go build everything that you can build on Ethereum or Solana, and it has an EVM network as well. So it's another EVM competitor, kind of like Say or Sonic, for example. So it's fast, cheap, 1 penny per transaction. And right now you can go and you can actually mine this. And so I'm not here to encourage you to go buy this token, but I want to bring it to your attention in case it's something that you're interested in. Proof of work blockchains have been a narrative before. And when alt season comes back, I'm pretty confident that layer ones are going to have a big run. Remember, Kaspa was quite a crazy run. Everyone wished that they got in Kaspa when it had first launched. And I believe this is another one of those opportunities. You can see they're backed by really high quality funds like Polychain, Alumni Ventures, Zero One Capital, and many, many more. And they've launched this app that they want to compete with like Venmo and PayPal. It's called Blip, the easiest way to pay, right? So when you want to pay people across the world, they believe that this is going to be the easiest way to pay people for remittance, cheap, fast, forget Western Union, forget MoneyGram. It's really difficult. It's even for me today, if I'm trying to pay somebody somewhere in the States or in Europe or something, and they don't want to take crypto from me directly like Solana or ETH, and I can't use Venmo, I can't use PayPal. Furthermore, I was banned, by the way, from PayPal and Venmo for using crypto back in like 2014 or 15. So I can't even use those apps. But Blip is a new app. It's in beta. If you guys want to go try it out. I think the best way when we're looking at new projects like this is essentially to go try them out. So Blip is an app you can download on the iOS or Android store and try it out. Try out the payment system. Now, as you guys can see, the core chain of Quai comes from a lot of really good backgrounds over here. You've got Alan from Apple. You got Dr. Carl Kretter from Consensus, which is Joe Lubin's company, which is basically like the company that founded Ethereum, essentially. You got David over here, who has worked at Circle, Kraken, Grayscale, and Fidelity. Raleigh is a CMO. He's from Onnit, which is Joe Rogan's company. John Boyd from Tesla. And we also have this competitive analysis to see kind of where they're placing themselves. And Quai Network is placing themselves similar to something like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Kaspa, Avalanche. It's a layer one. But what makes it unique is it's got horizontal sharding, which means that as it needs to scale, it could have different, essentially kind of blockchains that scale as it's needed, which allows it to get up to that 50,000 transactions per second. Another really interesting thing about Quai is it has this dual token economy. It's got two tokens. We'll talk about them in a little bit for promoting both save and spend. And the emissions are responsive, meaning that they can be adjusted according to the algorithm based on demand. It's energy-based money, and it's MEV resistant, which means that there's going to be no one who can essentially exploit the vulnerabilities that come in other networks like Ethereum and Solana, for example. And again, I think one of the most interesting things about it is proof of work. I really believe that proof of work blockchains are a very interesting thing. The problem with historically with proof of work chains has been it's been slow. You know, I've been very vocal about Kaspa, how much I like it. I think there was some issues around when they tried to launch their smart contracts. Quai doesn't seem to have that issue at the moment. And we'll show you some other really interesting data right here. So this is kind of crazy. When you look now about network usage and adoption, this is the transactions per day of these different blockchains. And you can see Bitcoin over here, the most, Litecoin, surprisingly, second most, and Quai actually has more transactions every day than Kaspa. If we're making a comparison here, I think that the closest one is Kaspa. It's a very similar type of project. But when you look at transactions per day compared to the market cap, because Quai is still a fairly low market cap for what it is trying to achieve. It still has a lot to prove, don't get me wrong, but look at this. When you look at the ratio of transactions versus market cap, it's by far outleading everything else. If you would have known about, let's say, Kaspa in the early days and been mining it, you wouldn't have had to put in your own money. You could have just ran a miner from your house and earned the tokens for free and made good money doing that in the early days. Right now, not a lot of people know about Quai Network, and so mining is still very profitable over there. Some of my biggest mistakes being in this industry for 13 years was not mining Bitcoin when no one else was doing it. And of course, it's a risk, right? You're going to pay some money for electricity and hardware to operate miners, but that's a risk that you take for potential huge upside in the future. There is projects and ecosystems being built over there right now. And one of these is the Quai miners. You can go check that out and see if you can join a pool of miners, for example, if you want to do it. But here's all the different kind of things being built on the network. You've got some big projects like a Cash, for example. You've got DEXs being built over here. The whole ecosystem is being built out, but it's still early days, right? And you've got also things like NFT marketplaces and all these other things being built. This is a pretty typical chart for a project launch. You can see if you want to go, if you're interested in purchasing Quai, you can go buy it over on LBank, the channel sponsor and our channel partner. And you can see it seems to, it's a little early to call it a bottom, but it's really good to not buy new projects when they launch and wait for price discovery. So I wouldn't say that you should rush into this. Go do some more research, see if it's something that you think is interesting. If things like proof of work chains that have a big ambitious goal, maybe maybe makes sense to allocate a small position in case this thing absolutely rips. I'm going to show you in just a second here how it compares to the other proof of work blockchains. And guys, again, if you're not on LBank, there's only 2 days left in this special, which is the sign up and deposit bonus. So the link is in the description below. Make sure you take advantage of that. It's a really good offer. Follow Quai on their X account at Quai Network, and you can check out all the developments. One of the most important things, I think, is to have conviction in the project that you're looking at. And one of the best ways to do that is follow the updates on their socials. So go give them a follow. All right, guys, now let's look at the market cap and kind of compare it to other comparables in the market. It's currently sitting at a $50 million market cap. Now, if you look at top proof of work chains, these are all proof of work chains, you can see that the market caps are huge for these other ones. Kaspa, $1.745 billion versus Quai, which is doing more transactions than Kaspa, at 50 million right now. Bitcoin SV, which is a huge scam, sitting still at 627 million, which is over 10x higher than the current market cap of Quai. But if we look at what I think is the closest comparable and how people can be comparing this project, they will be comparing it to Kaspa probably. All right. And so if we look at the all-time high for Kaspa, essentially it topped out in 2024 at $5 billion, which is 100x higher than where Quai sits right now. So again, guys, I'm not saying to go out and buy this token. They are a channel partner, but I'm very selective on who I work with. And I think that I'm probably going to set up a miner myself, start playing around with it. This is the most important thing, is go try it out. Go get the wallet, go get some tokens, go send them around, see if you like the experience, but being a super fast EVM chain in itself is also interesting. Now, we have to see how this plays out and how feedback comes, but even Sonic as an EVM chain was claiming to be the fastest EVM chain at 10,000 TPS. And right now, Quai is making a bold claim of 50,000 transactions per second as an EVM proof of work chain. So the TPS thing is a little bit difficult and convoluted sometimes, right? So I had a great interview with Andre Cronje that's coming out soon, talking about Sonic. And he explains in the interview, how these kind of metrics are measured, right? And if you just want to do simple transactions like sending tokens back and forth, it's very easy for someone like Sonic to achieve the same kind of throughput. But when you do more complex transactions that involve smart contracts, okay, now the question is, how much is that throughput? Because Quai is focusing on becoming a energy-backed cryptocurrency where there's actually two tokens, guys. There's actually two tokens. There's the one that I showed you over here, which is essentially the same thing as like Bitcoin and Ethereum. It's the network token. It's the one that's going to be volatile. It's the one that you want to look as a store of value and will become more valuable if and when the network becomes adopted. The other one is called Qi, and that is what they're calling their energy-backed stablecoin, which is pegged to the price of electricity. So it's interesting because you don't have a fiat-backed stablecoin, which, if you're like me and most Bitcoiners or most cryptocurrency enthusiasts, you know that fiat is a really poor way to preserve your purchasing power and your wealth. And so why hold your money in a dollar-backed stablecoin if you can have something that generally is a bit more consistent, like an energy-backed stablecoin? I think it's a new, interesting concept with a really brilliant team. Guys, I just want to bring it to your attention. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I will catch you guys tomorrow. See ya.